Hi, and welcome to my channel, Laura's Library Card. So today it is time for my March wrap-up. Sorry I kind of dropped out there for a hot second at the end of March. I just had a lot going on in my work life. It was kind of a hellish month of March, and it's only kind of getting better now, so anyway, I sort of predicted that March was going to be rough. I think I set my TBR at 11 books and I finished 10. So I was actually quite proud of that because I did not have as much opportunity to listen to audiobooks at work because of said hellish work month. So what did I finish in March? I finished 10 books. I carried over like 2 books that I was kind of in the middle of into April, so those will be coming soon. But for March, I read a total of 3,520 pages, and my average rating was a 3.7 stars, which is good and a little bit higher than other months. I was participating in the Tropical Readathon in March, and every book that I managed to finish did satisfy at least one prompt. So I will try to mention those as I talk about each book. So let's just dive right in and get started. So actually my month of March started with my favorite book of the month, which was Transcendent Kingdom by Gyasi. I listened to this on audiobook. I rated it 5 stars. And for me, this book was amazing. It was perfect. It was like she knew exactly what I wanted in a book and she wrote it for me. I say that because this book really focuses on a lot of neuroscience and theology. And we are following our main character of Gifty. She is in grad school doing research on neuroscience and the neural pathways that are responsible for addiction and pleasure receptors. And this is a topic that is close to her heart because she had an older brother who passed away before the start of the book, a few years previously from an overdose and drug addiction issues. And her mom has depressive issues in her life and went through one after her brother died and is going through one at the time of this book. So depression also kind of has to do with a lot of the pleasure receptors and, sort of pleasure seeking behaviors. So there was a really cool neuroscience element, and neuroscience was one of the majors that I had. I got a bachelor's degree in. And also another major element throughout this book, like I said, is the theology, because Gifty's mother is very religious and raised both of her children to be very religious. And throughout her whole life and throughout this book, we see Gifty's sort of journey and sort of struggles with and thoughts about God and Christianity and belief. And I personally really find that topic very interesting, and I love to talk to other people about it, but other people don't like to talk about it because they feel like religion is a very personal thing. And I agree with that, but also I find it very fascinating, like what makes people spiritual or religious or why they believe what they believe. So this just ticked all my boxes, rang all my bells. I just really enjoyed this book, and I felt like it was exactly what I was enjoying every moment of it. I felt like there was a lot of really great turns of phrase and even whole paragraphs of quotes that I was highlighting, and it's definitely a book that I want to purchase and reread in my future because I just thought it was really well written and really well done, and I really enjoyed it. So I cannot recommend Transcendent Kingdom enough. And this was my favorite book of March, and this satisfied the prompt of a book with multiple POC for the Tropical Readathon. The next 3 books are all books that were part of the Immortals After Dark series. I am participating in the Immortals After Dark read-along, and all 3 of the next 3 are by Kresley Cole. So I finished Kiss of a Demon King, which is the 6th book in the series, and this follows Sabine and Rydstrom's stories, or their story. He is the king of the demons. He is trying to do what is best for his people, and he's trying to actually gain his throne back. And Sabine, is the sort of queen of illusions. She's a sorceress, and they are fated mates, and we follow their story as they meet and try to figure out how to be in a relationship, because Sabine is sort of a very interesting character. Not only is she a badass bitch, but also she kind of has this morality chain of her sister. She walks this line throughout the whole book of being, is she good or is she evil? And I found that really intriguing because I felt like some of her actions were implying that she was like evil, especially at the start of the book. And then as the book goes on and on, we start to see some of her other good sides come out, and also some of her motives for the actions she's taken. And I don't feel like it's very much of a spoiler for me just to be vague enough to say that like one character has to make a big sacrifice for the other character. And I love that in my romance. That is a trope that I really enjoy, because I always feel like that's like, yep, there's true love here, because like a sacrifice is willing to be made. So I ultimately gave Kiss of a Demon King a solid 4.25 stars. Then I read The Warlord Wants Forever, which is the novella that is technically like 0.5 in the series, but the read along was putting it here kind of between books 6 and 7. And at first I didn't really understand why they stuck it here. I understood why people said it's not a great intro to the whole Immortals After Dark series. And after I've read it, I would agree with that. But also, I felt like after reading Untouchable, which is the 7th book, and which I'll talk about next, I do feel like it made more sense, because there is we kind of get to meet Mist and Nikolai, who are characters we've seen in the previous books like 1 through 6, but then like if you read Warlord Wants Forever here, it sort of kicks off the book 7, I thought, really well. So yeah, this is a novella between Nikolai and Mist. We see the two of them meet, and then there's kind of a time jump to 5 years later, after chapter 1 or 2. And I actually really enjoyed how much was packed into this novella. I have had a history before of not loving novellas because I feel like they don't leave enough time on page for emotional development and believability in a romance. But I actually felt like this one was done pretty well. We get to see a lot about Mist. She is sort of the master manipulator of men, and I saw a little bit of critique about that like women have more to bring to the table than their sexuality, and I agree with that statement, but also I thought that it was done really well with how Mist kind of functioned in her life. And then we have Nikolai, who has this other element of the book, is that Mist has this chain that is like if whoever holds it like will control her, and so how Nikolai deals with that I thought was done really well. And ultimately I enjoyed the resolution of the book, and I felt like again there was a sacrifice that had to be made, and then not to be out grand gestured. I so really liked the end of that book and felt like it packed a punch. So I ultimately enjoyed this novella more than I was expecting to. I do feel like it could have had a little bit more. I think it would have worked very well as its own full story. So I don't know for sure why it was a novella, but I ultimately gave The Warlord Wants Forever 3.5 stars. The last book that I read for the Immortals After Dark in March was Untouchable, also by Kresley Cole. This is the book 7 in the series, and we follow Murdoch and Daniela. Murdoch is a vampire. He is Nikolai's brother. Yes, there's like 4 Roth brothers. And then Daniela is a part Valkyrie, part like ice maiden, or I can't remember, Iceer, I think is what her title is. So we follow Daniela and Murdoch. They are fated mates, and they meet. And what I thought was kind of interesting about this story is that Daniela, because she's this like descendant of these ice people, she can't touch like anybody who's not also an Iceer, because they are too warm for her and they burn her, and they experience like extreme cold. So she's lived her whole life as an outcast from her people, and so she just has lived most of her life, or like most of her adult life anyway, like without any touch, without any friendships without any, you know, romantic relationships. And so she's just kind of lonely and desperate for company and for some, like, and she's sexually frustrated. And so she just really wants a mate. She wants a guy. She wants an alpha dude who's like protective of her and who loves her and who cherishes her. And then she gets Murdoch as her mate, and he is like the least alpha character I think we've encountered this whole time. I mean, he kind of comes into his own eventually, but he's also sexually frustrated because they can't touch, but also he doesn't want fate to have chosen his mate for him. And so there's a very interesting dynamic between the two of them. It's sort of almost the like reverse of some of the other books in this series, because it is usually, in most of the other ones that I've read, the guy who's like, you're my mate, I want you, like, let's make this work. And the girl who's like, nah, I have my own self-respect and freedoms here. Mm-mm. And in this book, it's like kind of the opposite, where Danielle is like, well, okay, I guess if you're my mate, sounds good to me. And Murdoch's like, no. So I thought this was done well. It is very like slow burn and mutual pining and, you know, mutual assistance because they can't touch each other. But I enjoyed how that was resolved. I kind of saw it coming and felt like they could have figured things out a little bit sooner, but yeah. So the 3 Immortals After Dark, I gave Untouchable 3.5 stars. And these 3 books fulfilled the prompts for the Tropical Readathon of a absent/dead parent, because they're all immortals and are around for thousands of years. All 3 of these are paranormal romance books. I counted The Warlord Wants Forever as a war setting, which is true. It starts off in like a battle scene, and then Untouchable was a 1-word title. So next on my list is Days of Blood and Starlight by Laini Taylor. This is the 2nd book in the Daughter of Smoke and Bones series. I am buddy reading this series, and this was the middle book of a trilogy. I do feel like it kind of suffers from that like middle book syndrome, where it's really just sort of a bridge from book 1 to book 3. It functioned to continue the plot and really set up a lot. I read this series a number of years ago, but I don't remember very much of it, especially book 3. So I feel like it does set up a lot for book 3, and I'm excited to dive back in. That being said, because of all the stuff that happened in book 1 and is sort of continually happening in book 2, this book is very bleak. Like the first one is very introduction to the world and introduction to these love interests, and it's like a love story, and based on what happens at the end of book 1, the two who are, you know, star-crossed lovers are apart and are not, they're not just like pining after each other. They think they can't be together, or they think the other one's dead or whatever. So this book is extreme. It's very bleak. It's very dark. But there's a lot more like world expansion happening, and I felt like there were a number of side characters and like sort of subplots that help push the book like carry you through. And Mick and Susanna bring some lightness to the book and some humor, and they're a bright spot for Karu. And then also I really love Ziri's character, especially at the end of the book. He is involved in the plot more, and I can't remember exactly what happens to him in book 3, but I am really looking forward to diving into book 3 probably in April. So ultimately I gave Days of Blood and Starlight 4 stars, and this counted for the buddy read trope for Tropical Readathon. The next book on this list is The Rivalry by Nikki Sloane. This is a sports romance, and we follow Kayla and Jay as our main characters. It's a sort of new adult, I would say, because they're both in college. I counted this as the coming of age prompt for Tropical Readathon because they're kind of transitioning, you know, they're in this like transitory period of their life, and it's kind of a stretch, but whatever. So The Rivalry is all about these rivals schools. These our two main characters go to rival schools, Michigan University and the Ohio State University. And Jay goes to Michigan, but like he doesn't particularly care a ton about the rivalry, and he plays football. But Kayla goes to Ohio State University, and She is a cheerleader, and her dad used to be a coach for the football team, and like her whole family like bleeds scarlet and gray, and she is a diehard football fan and really really cares about the rivalry. A lot of the biggest complaints about this book were that like the rivalry was like stupid, or like Kayla should have gotten over it. And for me, Laura, individual person, I don't care at all about sports. So like I understand that viewpoint of like took the rivalry a little far. But as someone who has lived in central Ohio for a number of years, this rivalry is legit. Like there are scenes in the book where they each are in like the other person's respective like bars, and like people are like taunting them, get like milkshakes thrown at their car, like they're called terrible names. Like that legit happens. Like I have been in situations where it's like almost a safety level thing that like this rivalry really exists and is real in real life. So I kind of did believe the level that went to. So yeah. And also I really appreciated in this book that both Kayla and Jay were like admired for being student athletes. Like Kayla was a cheerleader, and no one ever was like, oh, you're just a cheerleader. I thought that was awesome. And then also there's a lot of sex positivity in this book. They are being physically intimate, and he is really determined to make Kayla feel good, and he works with her about that. Like she is kind of like, I know I'm kind of can cause trouble, or like, you know, it might be a little extra work for me to feel good. And he's like, all right, sounds good. Like he like pushes her to acknowledge that this is something that she needs, and he encourages the two of them to figure it out together. And I thought that was awesome. Like, especially for like a college, you know, age people to be like, you know, she had previous boyfriends who didn't care about her pleasure, and I really loved that Jay did. So ultimately, I really enjoyed the rivalry. I would love to read more by Nikki Sloane, but everything that I was seeing on Goodreads said that this is sort of her, like, one of her lightest, fluffiest books. So I'm not 100% sure I want to do much of a dive into like her darker stuff, but I did really enjoy the writing and the characterization here, so I would give Nikki Sloane another shot. Next on this list is The Reckless Oath We Made by Bryn Greenwood. I actually first heard about this book from Melissa over at Libraries and Labradors channel. I will leave a link in the cards and down in the description. Go check out her channel. She reads a lot of really great books, and this is a not a historical fiction, a like literary fiction book. Some people kind of put this one in romance, and I feel like it's more literary fiction with romance subplots or themes. And it's going to be hard for me to talk about this book because I really don't have my feelings and thoughts all in line. But basically we follow our two main characters are Z, her name is Zorza, and she goes by Z, and then Gentry is like the main male character, I would say. And Z is like down on her luck, having trouble in her life, and her sister gets like kidnapped. Like her sister volunteers at a prison, and then there's a prison break, and her sister is missing and is potentially like a hostage in a hostage situation with these murderers who escape from this prison. And so Z is like at a loss. She doesn't know what's happening. The police are like looking into it because they want to recapture these murderers, but the police seem to think that maybe her sister had something to do with it, with the prison break. And like, so Z is trying to navigate this, and also her life is kind of falling apart in a lot of other ways as well. And then Gentry is a character who is autistic, and he speaks like with a ye old English. He thinks he is a knight from the Middle Ages. He's trying to build a castle. He speaks in a ye old English. My lady, dost thou needs protection, you know? And so it's written that way in the book, and I could see how some people would be thrown by that, but I actually really enjoyed it, and it really strengthened Gentry's personality and character for me. And so he is Lady Z's champion. Like, he has these voices in his head, and they told him that's the person that you need to be her champion. Like, so he is determined to do anything that Z could need or want. And she's kind of not really interacted with him particularly very much in the last couple of years, but like as soon as all this stuff starts happening, she kind of turns to him because she just really doesn't have any other options in her life. And so like there is a sort of romance subplot that happens between these two, but to me it wasn't the focus of the book. But like I'm not totally sure what the focus of the book was, because I mean, it was exploring the relationship between the two of them, but to me it didn't feel particularly like a romantic relationship. It was actually kind of a lot of plot in this book because they're trying to figure out what happened with the sister, and then like maybe trying to figure out where she went and what happened and like if they can do something about that. So I really enjoyed the reading experience. I listened to some of it on audio and I was reading some of it on ebook. And I was just like, I was hooked. I was pulled right along. I found the book exciting, but also I was like kind of conflicted because I felt like the final resolution made a lot of sense and I'd seen where it was going to go, but also I was like a hair unsatisfied. I don't know. I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoyed the writing that I was getting from Greenwood. I want to read more by her, and I did really enjoy it and I gave it 4 stars, but like it's really hard to describe. So I would recommend, and I hope to read more by this author. It's the best I could do. And I counted that for the ebook prompt for Tropical Readathon. The next book that I finished in March was, spoiler alert, by Olivia Dade, and I did a whole book review on this, so I'll leave that up in the cards and down in the description for you to go check out. I really enjoyed this book, and I really enjoyed doing a book review on it, which is spoiler free, so check it out. And the basic premise of this book is that we have Marcus and April. Marcus, who they both are major fans of this like book slash TV series that is sort of parallel to Game of Thrones. And the problem is, and they both write fan fiction for that whole fandom, but the problem is that Marcus is actually like a famous mega hot actor on that show. So he is keeping the fact that he writes fan fiction a secret because his career could be in trouble if it's ever found out that he's writing fan fiction that sort of contradicts the show and kind of says, yeah, this is a mess. Like, you know, the original source material of the books was way better. And then April also writes fan fiction, and the two of them are friends, like online from, you know, anonymous friends, because they both write fan fiction together. And she sort of goes viral when she posts a picture of her in some cosplay, and she is a plus size person. So there was a lot of support, but also a lot of hate because the internet. And so Marcus, as this like famous actor guy, like he thinks that she's attractive, but also it's kind of a PR stunt that he asks her out on a date. And so there are slight elements in this book of like catfishing / he knows based on their first date that like he knows who she is. She admits to writing fan fiction, and he realizes it's this person that he has developed a really great friendship with online. But that's why he wants to pursue her in a romantic relationship, but like he has to keep that a secret for his career, and yay tension because romance. So I really like this book. I gave it a 3.75 or like a 4 star, and I counted it for the celebrity romance trope for Tropical Readathon. 2 left. I read Love from A to Z by S.K. Ali. This was the Tropical Readathon team romance book group choice. I think they actually had 2 books, but this was the one I read. This is a YA romance that is following Adam and Zainab. They are about the same age, both about 18. She's a senior in high school. He's like a freshman in university. They meet in an airport on the airplane. They meet in the airport, both on the way to Doha for like spring break time. And it is a romance between the two of them. And they are both Muslim. They are both dealing with crap in their lives. Adam recently got a diagnosis of MS, which is something he's going to have to live with. It's a, you know, ongoing illness in his life, and is also what his mother died from a number of years previously. So he's kind of trying to figure out his life with this diagnosis and how to deal with the symptoms that are starting. And then Zainab is dealing with a teacher who is an Islamophobe and who is that she got suspended from her school sort of because of a misunderstanding, but like she is dealing with how like Islamophobia in general and how other people are looking at her because she wears a headscarf and sort of the constant small microaggressions she's had to deal with. I liked this book, but also it was not what I was wanting to read at the time that I was listening to it. I just wasn't really in the mood for a YA book, and I found the two main characters both to be kind of annoying for different reasons. Like Adam just seemed way too like mature and stoic and like not like an 18-year-old guy. And Zainab seemed the opposite. She seemed way too like immature. And also a number of times in the book where they were discussing these important topics of like chronic illness and living with that and kind of interacting with your family members, how he was going to communicate with his dad about this illness. And also for Zainab, like the Islamophobia she was dealing with. The book, in my opinion, leaned more like instructional and like talking to the reader and being like, hey, okay, here's your mini lesson on microaggressions and problems and problematic material. And I was like, okay, it just felt a little bit more like a pamphlet instead of like in the narrative. But also the other part of this was that the like gimmick of the book was that both Zainab and Adam are like keep these journals, and like whatever, that's fine. But then like that makes it even more unrealistic that the instructional component like would make any sense, because why would you be instructing, like if you're writing your journal as your own personal feelings, why would you pause and be like, well, here's like the instructions as to like what constitutes problematic interaction with people. So I don't know, for me, like I do think it was a good book. I think it was well written, but for me it just like wasn't what I wanted, and it was very like painfully YA. I think I'm kind of growing out of that to some extent, and ultimately I gave it as a personal like a 3-star rating. And the last book that I finished in March was, well, the last book I actually finished in March was Untouchable, but the last one I'm going to talk about here was The Project by Courtney Summers. This was the Page Turner Book Club choice for March, and this is a YA thriller. To me, this satisfied the like read something in a different to me genre, because I don't really read that many thrillers in my life. I try to sprinkle them in, but like I guess not that frequently. But this book has to do kind of with like cults, and we follow two different timelines between these two sisters. And the main character, Lo, her sister has kind of disappeared, and so she's trying to find her sister and find out what happened and find out a little bit more about this group of people that she joined before she disappeared. And is that group a cult, and what is their purpose, and is this leader guy like the real deal, or is he a shady character? So that's basically as much as I want to say. And I didn't really like this book. I read it physically, and I didn't have any trouble keeping track of like who was speaking. Some other people said that they struggled to keep the like voices distinct, but I didn't really have that problem. But for me, it was not thrilling. Like it was just not surprising. I predicted kind of everything. I was just kind of like ho hum, like very neutral throughout the whole book. I was not quite bored enough to stop reading it or to DNF it, but I was also not so interested that I felt like I had to keep reading. So I did feel like we had a very interesting discussion. I will link that down in the description to the live show where we had a discussion on this book, because I brought that up during the live show. I said this was really predictable and kind of like a little boring because of that. And someone said, well, maybe it was predictable because like that's supposed to be kind of the point, is that like the underlying creep factor of cults exist and this could happen to anyone. And despite our main character starting off like so cynical, like she start to be swayed, even coming from watching her feelings develop with regards to the people that she is meeting in the cult. Like that is, she starts to get some sympathy towards some of the people in the cult. And so it's like, that's kind of believable. And this happens in real life. So like maybe that's sort of like the insidious nature of this sort of cult or project. So I thought that was kind of an interesting take. For me, I felt like writing wise, there was some great turns of phrase, but there was also a number of other moments where I was like, I had to stop and reread a sentence 3 or 4 times just to like understand what was being said. It seemed like there was like an extra word or a missing word or something. And I gave it 2.5 stars just because I found it so kind of predictable and very like middle of the road for me. But it was at like a 2 or like maybe even less than a 2 before we had that discussion. So I felt like that discussion actually kind of brought me around a little bit more. And also I feel like the story kind of was going at a good pace until about 3/4 of the way through. And then suddenly like we went from 0 to 60 and there was like a sharp left turn. So I felt like that could have been layered in a little bit more subtly and carefully throughout the book. And also in my personal opinion, the epilogue was really crappy. So overall, I gave the project 2.5 stars. I did read Sadie a couple years ago by Courtney Summers, and I have almost no memory of it. My memory was very also similar, kind of middle of the road, and I remember being just kind of like about it, but I recorded nothing in my Goodreads as to what the rating was or a review. So altogether, those are the 10 books that I read in March. I am sorry this video just went on and on and on, but I felt like I had a good month. My overall rating was a 3.7, a little bit higher than average. And I also sort of feel like I started with my best book. I mean, obviously I couldn't predict that ahead of time, but it was all slightly downhill after that. But yeah, ultimately I was pleased with what I read, and I plan to continue the buddy read for the Daughter of Smoke and Bone series. I plan to continue the Immortals After Dark read-along project series, and I already have a number of books kind of lined up for April, and I am looking forward to April, hopefully, fingers crossed, being a little bit better work-wise, and therefore I can have a little more time to dive back into audiobooks in April. If you have read any of the books that I mentioned or have any comments about them, or if you have any suggestions for another book by Nikki Sloane or another book by Bryn Greenwood to dive back into, or if you vehemently disagree with anything that I've said in this video, please leave a comment about any of those things because I love to have the conversation continue in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe and come back next time. Talk to you later. Bye.